Listen, I might have made the most game-breaking rogue build we will see for quite a while. Not only do we have massive CC capabilities, freezing enemies, we have poison scaling, ice explosions, shadow explosions, decoy that taunt, and yes, explode. We run dash, which makes us mobile, and speed farming has never felt so good, and we have a source of unstoppable. And did I mention that this build technically has 10 skills? Yeah. 10. Now real quick guys, if you wouldn't mind, hit that like button and subscribe for more daily Diablo 4 content. Every little bit helps get the video out to more people, and I appreciate it greatly. What's going on, amigos? Today I want to share with you my rainbow, triple, imbued, twisting, grenade, dash build. I'm sure I can come up with a better name for the build, so let's just call it a game-breaking rogue build for the time being. Because in my honest opinion, that's what this is. But let me say this, it's not game-breaking like bug damage game-breaking. But with this build, we're technically able to run 10 skills, 11 if you can fit in Umbra's aspect somehow. Now this build will absolutely take you in the T100s, easily. But I will not be running T100 in this video because I am only level 71. So before people start yelling at me in the comments telling me that I should be able to kill things 90 levels higher than me, let's recap what this build has going for it, and then I'll let you decide and test it out for yourself, especially those who are already level 100, and let me know how it works, even though I already know it's gonna work. So much like the Trapper Rogue, Poison Rogue, and the Frost Grenade Rogue, this build, all of these builds are capable of running T100s with ease pre-Doomsday patch. And yeah, that's what I'm going to be calling it. These three builds have multiple things in common, but the biggest thing they all had / have in common is this: crowd control cycling. Now, Trapper Rogue relies on poison trap knockdowns and death traps paired with shared misery and daze effects to chain crowd control and whittle them down with poison scaling while they are totally immobilized and, well, knocked down and dazed. Poison Rogue relied on concealment stealth and stacking poison traps to kite and continuously knock down enemies while they stacked poison infinitely. Paired that with daze, and yeah, they just nuke them with poison. Now, Frozen Grenade relies on smoke grenades with dazed enemies paired with Icy Alchemist and Frostbitten to freeze your enemies indefinitely, and the damage scale is from Frigid Finesse, Mixed Cold Imbuement, which doubles when they're frozen, and your Penitent Greaves. Now you pair this with Icy Alchemist that allowed you to scale shadow explosive damage when you inflict shadow damage to chilled and frozen enemies, allowing your damage per second to skyrocket. Now there's a few other things to all of these builds, but you guys understand the general thing I'm explaining here. At least I hope so. It's crowd control. So this build has the poison trap knockdown, smoke grenades to daze and amplify damage, paired with Frostbitten to have a huge % chance to freeze, and a decoy trap that taunts nearby enemies for 5 seconds, which ironically is on a 5-second cooldown. And yes, we also run Icy Alchemist for explosions because who doesn't like explosion? Now we'll go ahead and get into the gear, and we'll get into the aspects and how they work and synergize with each other. Alright, so for our helmet, this is my new favorite aspect in this season, and this is why we can afford to run dash in this build, because it also drops a smoke grenade at the end of dash, and has cooldown reducing capabilities determined by how many enemies you hit, and this is even getting patched and buffed in the next 1.1.1. So not only do we get to drop the smoke grenade, which we now don't have to have on our bars, but because we are dropping the smoke grenade, this triggers our brutal malignant heart of trickery, which also drops a decoy at the end of our dash. Now the brutal heart of trickery drops a decoy trap when we use a subterfuge skill. This decoy trap taunts all nearby enemies and explodes after 5 seconds, dealing shadow damage. This is by far my favorite thing about the season, is this combo right here from Quickening Fog, an aspect that nobody ever looked at before. So because we run dash, and at the end of our dash, it drops a smoke grenade. Smoke grenade is considered a subterfuge skill, which then procs the caged heart of trickery that drops our decoy trap. So on our chest piece here, we are running the might. We run this because of the damage reduction that we receive every time we spam our puncture. For our gloves, we are running shared misery. That way we can spread our crowd controls to all surrounding enemies. For our pants, we're running disobedience. It is a must, and it's very nice for the build because our main imbuement on our bar is our poison, so we always will have high up times of disobedience stacks. So for our boots, we really only have a single option here. It's Penitent Greaves. Now, the reason that I say this is because this is what's going to guarantee that we chill all surrounded enemies, allowing us to synergize things like our Frostbitten Amulet. Enemies have to be chilled when they're hit with our grenade skills to have that chance to freeze them. The good news is that Penitent Greaves really are easy to farm. They come across in my nightmare dungeons quite a bit. For the crossbow, I am running Blade Dancers, but there's definitely room to improve here. I think I was even thinking about running Icy Alchemist for the extra 100% bonus scale to the explosion damage, but I haven't tested it yet. It is on the agenda for sure though with the build. One hands, we use Bursting Venoms. This is because infinite poison stacking is always nice, especially for single target damage. But it's also because Bursting Venoms, when it does proc, and we're killing elite packs, for example, that are just indefinitely frozen, we want to just deal with them before our CCs break or before they become unstoppable. Now, for our offhand, we are actually not opting to run Condemnation, even though I do think that's a great dagger. But we are running Ashira's dagger, and there is a good reason for this. I'll go over that after we go over the gear when I'm explaining how everything works and synergizes together. So for rings, we are running Icy Alchemist. This allows us to get those explosions when hitting chilled enemies with shadow imbued attacks. And we run Umbral for the resource generation when we crowd control an enemy. Since we're spreading our CCs everywhere, this is a good source of resource gen. But I am weighing some options here as well. Let's go over our Malignant Hearts that we run for the build. So for your jewelry, you definitely want a Brutal and a Vicious socket. These are a must-have for the build. And the Wrathful can fit into any colored socket, so for the third, it doesn't obviously matter. So for the Brutal gem, it is our Caged Hearted Trickery. This is our decoy trap. Our Vicious, we are running the Caged Heart of Cluster Munitions. And then our Wrathful that we choose to run in this build is actually the Vile Apothecary. This is our super Wrathful class specific. This gives us a 5 to 15% chance to inflict all imbuement effects on the targets. And this is why I say we are technically running 10 to 11 skills between the two Malignant Hearts here, because between the procs of all three imbuements, plus stun grenades, plus smoke grenades, guys, let me tell you right now, this stuff procs so much. Vile Apothecary, I think something that people aren't really noticing is that this isn't a lucky hit chance. It's a normal flat chance between 5 and 15%. And yes, obviously you want the higher end. You want, you know, I have a 14% here, but you have to understand that this procs a lot. And that's why we opt to run Ashira's dagger, because of attack speed. Attack speed makes it to where your twisting blades spin around you faster, right? So the more that it spins, the faster that it spins, the more that we're hitting targets and having a chance to proc this 15% top end chance to proc our 3 imbuement effects. And Ashira's dagger gives us stacking attack speed. Now this is also what I mentioned earlier. I am thinking about trying out accelerating and replacing it with the Umbral, just to stack more attack speed. Now, Cluster Munitions is a lucky hit chance to have a 20% chance to launch 5 stun grenades that deal so-and-so physical damage and stuns enemies per 0.5 seconds. Now, the reason that this isn't bad either is because now, with the changes from the Doomsday patch, everybody is leaning towards stacking lucky hit chance, so we can have siphoned strikes feel as good as it can be. So because of this, I am running lucky hit chance on my rings and on my gloves, and I have, I think, 30% lucky hit chance. Let me just check real quick. Yes, I have 34.2% extra lucky hit chance. So yes, the stun grenades, they proc a lot. For our amulet here, we run Frostbitten. Now this is the most important part to the build. When we hit enemies with our grenade skills, we have a chance equal to double our quick strike chance to be instantly frozen. So in this case, because I have 25% crit chance, 26 rather, they have a 52% chance to be frozen when hit with a grenade skill. Now, because of when we dash, it automatically casts a smoke grenade at the end of our dash, giving that chance to freeze the enemies. Before we get into the build, I do want to say, of course, we are running combo points for our specialization. I tried running Inner Sight, And I just don't know how people run without combo points, because Inner Sight, yes, technically, when you get the Inner Sight proc, you are going to proc more Vile Apothecary, but you are doing considerably less damage. And with poison scaling and with explosion scaling, I think by far combo points are the way to go. So now let's take a look at our skill tree. So the skill tree is pretty simple, and you know, it is basically the same, but there are a few things that I do want to note. So, of course, we run our Puncturant into Fundamental, we run our Twisting Blades into Improved Twisting Blades because of the Daze effect. We have 2 points in the Siphonage Strikes, 3 points in the Sturdy because damage reduction. We want damage reduction as much as we can, especially since the damage reductions were nerfed in the Doomsday patch. Of course, we max out our Weapon Mastery, and our main hand is going to be Swords for the increased multiplied damage. We do run Dash, right? So because we run Dash, we run Enhanced Dash, which is going to give us the 15% increased crit strike damage when we're dashing through enemies. But we're also running Discipline Dash, so it slows. And if they are already slowed, which Chill slows enemies, they're going to be dazed again. So that is just a big source of daze, a big source of crowd control. And because they're dazed, when we crit strike a dazed enemy with trick attacks, they're knocked down for 0.5 seconds. And when they're knocked down, that procs our concussive, which gives us a crit chance increase by 4%. Our source of unstoppable is concealment. This allows us to go stealth and move freely through enemies, grants us a big movement speed increase. And we don't have to have smoke grenade on our bar because it gets procced when we dash through an enemy because of the quicken and fog aspect. So we actually are running Enhanced Smoke Grenade. This was buffed in the Doomsday patch. This gives us a 20% multiplicative damage increase when enemies are affected by Smoke Grenade. Just another way to daze, by the way, because Smoke Grenade does daze for 4 seconds. We run Poison Trap. This is a secondary subterfuge skill so we can actually dash. After the 5 seconds, our decoy trap explodes. We can then set up a poison trap. It'll decoy again, send in all enemies inside the poison trap, knocking them down, and then with Subverting, we deal 10% multiplicative damage when they're standing inside the poison trap. Again, just a really good combo. And then, of course, with Enhanced Poison Trap, again, they get knocked down. More crowd control. We max out our Exploit, of course. We max out our Malice. Exploit being healthy and injured, increased damage to them, and Malice being increased damage to vulnerable targets. We take a point in the Shadow Crash. We max out Consuming Shadows. If you want, you can even remove a point in Consuming Shadows and place it in somewhere, you know, like an extra point in a Frigid Finesse or something. But again, just a reminder, Vile Apothecary inflicts Shadow Imbued damage. It does not need to be activated, does not need to be on your bar. So because we are proccing Shadow Imbued damage, Shadow Explosions are going off, proccing Consuming Shadows. We take our 3 points in the Precision Imbuement for our imbued skills gain 9% crit strike chance. This means even when we are proccing our Vile Apothecary, they are getting 9% increased crit strike chance because they're technically imbued skills. We are taking Poison Imbuement as our main imbuement. This is what we run on our bar. And we go all the way up into Blended because we want the crit strikes with poison imbued skills to deal extra poison damage. And again, the way that Vile Apothecary works is when we do proc, this is why we run all the way through Mixed Cold Imbuement. When we do proc, we are dealing 20% multiplicative damage to crowd-controlled enemies. We double this for frozen enemies, and that's why we also pair this with Frigid Finesse, because we're dealing even more damage to chilled and frozen enemies. We take 1 point into Innervation. I actually do not have my last talent point. I've been extremely lazy, but I would recommend either putting your last talent point into Innervation here, or you can opt to put it in Second Wind. I personally think 2 points in Second Wind is more than enough. Every 100 energy we spend grants us another 10% increased lucky hit chance. Obviously, this is for Siphonage Strikes, for Cluster Munition, Malignant Heart. And of course, since we're running Poison Trap, we run the Trap Mastery, which grants us 12% increased crit strike chance against vulnerable and crowd-controlled enemies. Everything's going to be vulnerable because we run Exploit Glyph. In the off chance that it's not vulnerable, they're going to be crowd controlled because they're in the poison trap. And then for our keystone, we run Close Quarters Combat. And this, again, for the newer rogues out there, Puncture, our basic attack, counts as a marksman skill. So this is why close quarters combat is pretty much the only thing that you want to run here. If you don't care for whatever reason about the damage increase, you can try running Momentum, because we're constantly freezing and dazing enemies. And Momentum, when at 3 stacks, you're getting the damage reduction, the movement speed, the energy regen. Personally, I always run close quarters when we damage a close enemy with our Puncture, being our marksman, and our Twisting Blades, being our cutthroat. We grant ourselves attack speed bonuses. When both attack speed bonuses are active, we deal 30% increased damage against crowd controlled enemies. So for the Paragon, we're not going to look at mine that I have in game, because obviously I'm not, maxed out. I do have a maxed out Paragon board that is on my build planner that we are going to take a look at. All right, so this is the build planner over on D4 Builds. The link, of course, will be in the description down below. So, starting board, we are going to be taking Closer. All the glyphs in this Paragon board are going to be active at level 15. Ideally, you want your glyphs to be level 15 to have the increased radius. So, Closer. This is going to give us a huge cutthroat skill increase, damage increase, which is just an additive bucket. But the bonus is also nice. When wielding a melee weapon, and we are a melee rogue, we take 10% reduced damage. So in the starting board, we obviously take our Prime and our Skillful. This is for extra damage percent additives. We are taking Lawless for armor, because any bit of armor we can get, we're going to take. Our second board of choice is Cunning Stratagem. And in here, we are just mainly coming in here for the glyph. We don't care about any other rare node, aside from the 2 that are inside the glyph location here. And we're slotting in Exploit. Exploit is when we damage an enemy, the bonus, when we damage an enemy, they become vulnerable. So this is our mass infliction of vulnerability. In here, we are taking Lawless for the increased armor, and we are taking Finisher for the core skill damage. Core skill damage is one of the main things that will scale your poison damage. It's really good. This is ideal for getting on your weapons, your crossbows, your one hand. Again, since the Doomsday patch changed things up, rogues are building differently. Close damage is not as important with this build as core damage. For whatever reason, core damage scales better than close when it comes to poison. So for board number 3, it's Tricks of the Trade. And here we're going to be slotted in Diminish to buff our rare nodes within the range. When we have our bonus, we take 10% reduced physical damage from vulnerable enemies. This is huge. We're always going to be inflicting vulnerability. The rare nodes that we're going to be buffing are the Armor node, Lawless, and the Elite node, Focused. So when this is level 15 to 21, you're going to be getting 400 plus armor from Lawless. This is actually insane. And then, of course, we're taking the Legendary node. This grants every time we spam Puncture, we are granting a 25% increased damage to our Cutthroat skill. Other rare nodes that we're grabbing on the way would be Brawler. This is damage reduction from close enemies, damage to close enemies. We come down here for Havoc as well, because crit strike damage is always a nice thing to have. Board number 4 is Eldritch Bounty. Eldritch Bounty, we are not opting to go all the way up to the Legendary node. I don't think it's worth it. I think I'd rather have an extra glyph than the Legendary node. But we do take the Potent node here for imbued skill damage. We take the one towards the middle, Ready Supply, which is cooldown reduction and non-physical damage. These all help scale our imbuement damage that procs, but also our poison damage. We're slotting in Combat here. This will give us increased crit strike damage. And then when we crit strike or critically strike, we restore 12% of our energy cost. Our 5th board, we're coming back to the Tricks of the Trade, and we're coming down here. Our 5th board is going to be Cheap Shot. This is another board that we kind of fill out a lot. There's just a lot of good things on the board. And here we are running Control. This is increased damage to crowd controlled targets, and the bonus being increased damage to slowed, chilled, or increased damage to chilled or slowed enemies or stun. If they're stunned or frozen, they deal double damage, much like our Frigid Finesse and Cold, mixed cold imbuement. And here we are taking Devious for extra crowd control damage. we're taking wiles for the damage reduction to slowed enemies. We're pretty much always slowing enemies because a lot of the time everything's going to be slowed. From our cold imbue, if you run penitent, this is also really great because everything will be slowed around you. We take oppress for the damage to crowd control and extra crit strike damage to crowd controlled enemies. We take safeguard for damage reduction to elites and armor. And then our last and final board, we come over here to the bottom of Eldritch Bounty, and we are going to be running turf in the exploit weakness board. Now turf gives us damage to close enemies, but it also gives us damage reduction against close enemies. And because it's exploit weakness board, there is actually a whole vulnerable section in here that grants us 25% extra vulnerable damage through the board itself. And yeah, that's it for the build. As always, like my normal guides, I will end it with a nightmare dungeon. Again, I am only level 70. I am not clearing T100s at level 70. So this is just to show you how the build works and just how it looks. So yeah, as always, thank you for watching. If you made it this far, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more daily Diablo 4 content. And until next time, amigos, take care.